maybe you can tell us, who are you and why are you the most censored person in the world these days?
Well, I'm a PhD molecular biologist and biochemist and virologist of more than 40 years, been looking at how particularly retroviruses, but how viruses cause disease by dysregulating the immune system. We've done seminal work in 4 or 5 fields: epigenetics, gene expression, development of technologies to look at disease signatures, a lot of therapeutic development, and unfortunately, or fortunately, in 2009, we discovered a new family of mouse-related viruses, contagious mouse cancer-causing virus, and it was published to great fanfare in the journal Science on October 8th of 2009, first electronically. But then as our studies continued throughout 2010 and 11 with other investigators confirming more strains of mouse viruses, we did a lot of work showing a heavily contaminated blood supply. And then the realization in 2011, really, that there were many other disease associations other than chronic fatigue syndrome and autism. There were many cancers. There were blood disorders like ITP, which is a bleeding disorder that is a side effect of MMR vaccination. And the work basically started to show that the mixture of animal tissues and the injection of these mouse viruses, monkey viruses, cow viruses, they're called adventitious agents, that they most likely got into the human virome at the levels that affected 25 to 50 million Americans by way of not only a contaminated blood supply, but vaccines.
Okay. And why have you been censored so much lately? I mean, between Plandemic and your interviews, we joked last time, you're like whack-a-mole Judy, but you really seemed that all of your content's being taken down. Do you have thoughts why your stuff seems to trigger so many forces?
Well, yeah, I think the reason is that discovery and the fact that the blood supply had been contaminated for probably the entire 30 years with a new family of, AIDS really, and cancer-causing AIDS like retroviruses, that they could recombine and be contagious. So you and I could share coffee and through water droplets, through what we're seeing now with COVID-19, that you can cough a cancer-causing virus that can go through the generation, that these things were transmissible through as a contagion, and they came through the vaccines. That was 25 times minimum HIV at the height of the HIV infection, which was 1991. So here it was 91, it was 25, it was 1 million Americans with HIV infection. And the cost to the economy, the cost to the world of that HIV being spread through a contaminated blood supply, as we recall when we were told only it was gay-related immune deficiency and it couldn't be transmitted that way, and they didn't. And then in fact we found with Ryan White, the hemophiliac small child, and Arthur Ashe, who got a blood transfusion during a heart surgery. So all of a sudden it was, oh my God. So when that this virus could have spread around the world by a contaminated blood supply. Now in 2011, our work was clearly showing at least 25 times that. The economy simply couldn't support that level because it was the fault of the government in doing things. It's called xenotransplantation. When you inject foreign tissue, foreign, the word xeno means foreign, and so when you inject animal tissue into humans, bypassing directly into their blood, the realization was you could pick up dormant viruses that don't hurt the animals or cause anything, and we don't even know they're there. So the realization was, oh my God, how many strains of monkey, mouse, cow, and other kinds of viruses and microbes were entering the human population because of these untested, they haven't been tested since 1986, was the realization that Del Bigtree and Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s Children's Health Defense Fund, with lawsuits and FOIA's Freedom of Information Act, proved this last year, that in fact they had done no safety studies, and had no evidence at all that vaccines couldn't cause these diseases. Then we made the association of many strains, and the level of damage to our society, we simply couldn't afford it, based on that being 25 times the trillions of dollars that the HIV epidemic cost us. This was 25 times more than that.
Wow. So the ramifications on the human race are just, they're massive. And it shows that this has been going on for 30 years. And that's why you think you're being silenced or trying to be silenced.
Correct. And that's what the books clearly say. Our first book, Plague, talks about these viruses, very detailed science with at least every single statement we make is referenced to a study, to an event, and that's our book Plague, and in the foreword of that, of our paperback, in the new material of the paperback of our book, I talked all about what I didn't know at the time. The hardback came out in 2014. The paperback came out in 17, and I had no idea. And the new material discusses the depth of Tony Fauci's role and the corruption at the level of the scientific fake news. That the realization that our top scientific journals like Nature there in the UK and Science in the US, the editors, the opinion articles were taking science and covering up the plague of disease with a plague of corruption. So that's why we wrote our second book, because in our first book we had no idea. We were reporting the science, and our first book, nobody said one word about it, despite from the government. So if we're wrong, and we're heavily referenced here with emails and the scientific papers, everything we said in here, every word is backed up by a supportive facts, and was fact checked by the attorneys at Skyhorse Publishing. Every word was correct, and yet deafening silence. And all of a sudden in 2019, with our book publishing April 14th, Plague of Corruption. Plague of Corruption simply started when we, as we discussed before, when we realized it was the vaccines and the xenotransplantation, and really corruption, as the government over decades, not just a few years, has covered up the infection, the contaminants and the adventitious agents, and how they're driving the chronic infectious disease, cancer, really this explosion of disease in the vaccinated. That's not supported in the unvaccinated. They're not sick. So because of